Hello! Binabati ko po kayo ng isang magandang araw. Welcoming you to Bread of Life GenSan's Sunday online streaming. Kamusta po kayo? Write down some comments sa ating pong comment box at the same time, ilagay po ninyo kung saan po kayo nanonood. At sana po ay nasa mabuti rin kayong kalalagayan. Pwede nyo rin pong i-share ang link ng ating broadcast para po mayroong sa ibang mga tao baka sakali matulungan po sila ng ating broadcast ngayong araw na to. Meron na po isang malagang announcement, lalong-lalo po sa mga taga-GenSan, nag-stay sa GenSan o mga karatig na area na malapit po sa GenSan. Yung iba po sa inyo na taga-GenSan, maaring matagal na po nagtatanong o nag-request, babalik na po tayo sa ating face-to-face or physical gathering starting this coming Sunday, February 7, 2021. Ang ating pong service ay isa lang, from 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock lang po. Ang problema lang po dahil susunod po tayo syempre sa patakaran po ng health protocols po ng gobyerno, ang capacity lang po natin pwedeng matanggap ay 50 seats lang po, 50 participants o attendees po. Kaya po kinakailangan po mag-online registration po muli tayo at amin pong i-share ang link ng registration po sa ating pong Facebook page na Bread of Life GenSan. And so, by the way, ang ating pong gathering next week, simulan po na magiging live streaming din po tayo. Ibig sabihin po, pagkatapos po ng live streaming natin, ang link po natin will already be accessible anytime. So, just go to Bread of Life GenSan Facebook page. So, kung kayo po ay hindi makaka-join sa ating live streaming online po and so are yours used to watching po ng ating broadcast in the afternoon, pwede nyo po naman ma-access yung link anytime. At kung kayo po ay hindi pa nakasubscribe at na-like po ang ating Facebook, please do subscribe and like para po ma-notify po kayo ng ating pong link ng broadcast po natin. Marami pong salamat at nawa na ang ating pong desire ng ating face-to-face ay gusto ko natin, kumbaga sinasabi nga ng scripture, let us not, kumbaga forsake the gathering together. Ang isang concept po niya sa Proverbs sinasabi, as iron sharpens another iron. So yung po nagpapatibayan po tayo sa isa't isa. At hindi po nangyayari yun kung ganito lang po tayo, online lang po tayo, streaming, at nakikinig lang po tayo. Na pwede naman po, nagagawa naman po natin paminsan-minsan yung Zoom, nag-gathering po. Pero maganda rin po talaga yung face-to-face at physical po. There's some energy that is transferred from each other kapag tayo po ay sama-sama. Of course, yun lang nga po ang problema. Medyo limitado po ang capacity ng ating convenarium. Anyway, tayo po ay magpapatuloy sa ating pag-aaral ng pinamagatan po nating message ng mga ilang series po. Ika-10 na po natin ngayon. The title is Managing Your Ego. Ang source po natin ay si Ryan Holiday at galing sa kanya pong libro na Ego is the Enemy. Natapos po natin ang unang bahagi which is Aspire. At kung titingnan nyo po sa slide, to whatever you aspire, ego is your enemy. Kaya nag-aspire ka, ang problema pa rin ego. So, to manage the ego, we need to, at kaya ito po naging ang theme ng part 1, to be humble in our aspirations. And secondly, natapos po natin last Sunday, ang part 2, which is success. To whatever success you have achieved, again, ego is the enemy. May kalaban pa rin po tayo kahit umasenso na tayo. And so, the way to manage the ego is we need to be, ang ating pong theme dito, is to be gracious in our success. And simula ngayon po, ating pong talakayin ang part 3 ng libro, ng message na to, which is failure. To whatever failure and challenges you will face, ego is the enemy. Talagang sa iba-ibang bahagi ng stage ng ating buhay, ego po talaga, yung self talaga ang ating kalaban. That's why at this portion, to manage the ego, we need to be, ang theme po is resilient in our failures. So, and dito na po tayo sa ikatlong bahagi. Last week po, sa isang portion po ng ating pag-aaral, natalakay po natin yung principle po na maintaining your sobriety sa pag-asenso sa buhay. Ibig sabihin yung coolness, yung stillness, yung pagiging kalmado sa buhay. At napag-aralan ko natin ang isa sa mga leaders po ngayon sa buong mundo na ang pangalan niya si Chancellor Angela Merkel. Ito pong week na to, pinadala po sa akin ng aking wife ang isang link po ng article po tungkol po kay Angela Merkel. Pinadala po ito ng isa niyang kaklase nung college. Galing po ito sa Lanka News Web or LNW na Sri Lankan latest news, entertainment, political, world sports website po ito. At ito po'y pinost nila sa kanilang website ng January 26, 2021. So, itong week lang po na ito. So, allow me to show the picture to you. Yan po, sa picture, si Chancellor Angela Merkel. Ang article po is about Germany bid farewell to Merkel with 6 minutes of warm applause. Tapos na po yung kanyang pagiging leader. Sabi po, the Germans elected her to lead them and she led 80 million Germans for 18 years with competence, skill, dedication, and sincerity. Grabe po yung kanya pong character, yung virtues naman. Let me read. During these 18 years of her leadership of the authority in her country, no transgressions were recorded against her. Wala pong kaso. She did not assign any of her relatives as secretary. Wala pong miyembro ng pamilya na inassign sa isang posisyon. She did not claim that she was the maker of glories. She did not get millions out of her country. Nor did anyone cheer her life. She did not receive charters and pledges. She did not fight those who preceded her. She did not utter nonsense. Kumbaga, she did not appear in the alleys of Berlin to be photographed. Hindi po siya nagpakitang tao. Kunwari nasa alley, kumakamusta, nagbibigay lang ng tulong sa mga tao para mapicturan. Sigurado, minaiisip po kayo regarding that. Kaya nga, ang nakalagay doon sa article po, sabi, Angela Merkel, the woman who was dubbed the Lady of the World. And she was described as the equivalent of 6 million men. Ganong kataas ang pananaw sa kanya. Sabi po ng article, Merkel left the party leadership yesterday, yung position, and handed it over to those after her. And Germany and its German people are in the best condition. Grabe. Imagine, iiwanan mo ang pagkatapos ng iyong panunungkulan na umangat ang iyong bansa. The reaction of the Germans was unprecedented in the history of the Germans. The whole people went out to the balconies of the houses and clapped spontaneously for 6 minutes of warm applause. Hindi man sila nandoon sa area, siyempre hindi naman sila kakasya lahat sa area na kung saan siya pinarangalan. Probably yung kanyang sinasabi na kanyang pagtatapos, Pero ang sabi po, lumabas sa mga tao, nagpalakpakan sa kanilang mga balkonahe. Grabe, 6 na minuto ang kanilang ginawa. Germany stood as one body bidding farewell to the leader of Germany, a chemical physicist who was not tempted by the fashion or the lights and did not buy real estate, cars, yachts, and private planes, knowing that she is from former East Germany. Dati bago hati ang Germany, East and West. Ang West ang mayaman, ang East Germany mahirap sila. So na tanggal na yung wall, Berlin Wall, galing siya sa kahirapan, kaya you would say siguro kung galing siya sa kahirapan dapat nagpayaman siya, pero hindi. No? Sabi po ng article, she left her post after leaving Germany at the top 18 years and she did not change her old clothes. Nanatili yung mga damit niya. Kaya yung nagsulat po nito, sabi, God be upon this silent leader. God be upon the greatness of Germany. At the press conference, a female journalist asked Merkel, we noticed that your suit is repeated. Don't you have another? Paulit-ulit ang damit. She replied, I am a government employee and not a model. Hindi naman, grabe. Hindi na siya model na paparada ng magagandang mga damit, pabalit-palit. At another press conference, they asked her, do you have housemaids who clean the house, prepare meals, and so on? Her answer was, ang sagot po niya sa journalist na ito, no, I do not have female workers and I do not need them. My husband and I do the work at home every day. Then another journalist asked, who is washing the clothes? You or your husband? Her answer was, I arrange the clothes and my husband is the one who operates the washing machine. And it is usually at night, sa gabi lang sila naglalaba because electricity is available and there is no pressure on it. And the most important thing is to take into account the neighbors from the possible inconvenience. And the wall separating our apartment from the neighbors is thick. Grabe, sa gabi na lang dahil thick naman. So, para yung pressure ng kuryente o ng tubig probably para hindi maapektuhan. Wala yung entitlement. Siya naman ang chancellor eh. I don't know bakit wala silang tirahan ng kanilang chancellor. No? Bakit ang sasabihin later on makikita natin nasa isang apartment lang siya. She said, sabi niya doon sa mga reporters, I expected you to ask me about the successes and failures in our work in the government. Huh? Ang in-expect niyang tatanungin, ano yung maganda, ano yung kulang, ano yung failures niya. Oh? Hindi yun ang tinanong dahil siguro nga ang ganda ng kanyang ginawa sa gobyerno. Ang ganda ng ginawa niya para sa kanilang bansa, pinaangat niya ang kanilang bansa. Pinaangat niya probably mga nahihirapan, nagkaroon ng mga trabaho. In the midst ng pandemic, meron nga silang ginawa. Tinulungan nila yung mga tao. No? Yung mga nahihirapan dahil nagsara, tinulungan ho nila. Habang ang ibang bahagi sa buong mundo, ang dami mga tao ang nawalan ng trabaho. Nagsara yung mga maliliit na businesses. Hindi niya tinulungan probably yung mga malalaking businesses. Ang tinulungan niya yung mga maliliit na mga tao. Grabing klaseng leader. Ito, pakinggan niyo po. Mrs. Merkel lives in a normal apartment like any other citizen. This apartment she lived in before being elected Prime Minister of Germany. Doon na siya nakatira. Hindi siya umalis doon. She does not own a villa, servants, swimming pools, and gardens. Kaya sabi po, this is Merkel, the Prime Minister of Germany, the largest economy in Europe. Grabe. Siguro kung sasabihin natin sa mga nagpo-post palagi, lagi nasabihin na, sana all. I guess you're thinking about our own country, from the national to the local leadership. That's why, nung akin pong nabasa yan, naiyak ako ng konti at saka nagnanalangin ako sa Panginoon. Sabi ko, Panginoon, mag-raise up ka naman. ng mga leader na kagaya niya. I don't know, baka meron naman tayong mga leaders na hindi lang nababalita na mga ganyang klaseng leader. Sana makapagpaangat tayo mula sa mga susunod na henerasyon na mag-build up tayo ng mga leaders na magiging na nakagaya ni Angela Merkel. Oh, grabe. Sana all. Theodore Roosevelt, alam natin dati presidente ng Amerika, although of course many years ago patay na siya, the chief factor in any man's success or failure must be his own character. Ang pinakamahalaga sa pag-asenso sa kapanahunan ng failure ng isang tao, character. Yung nasa loob, yung pundasyon sa loob. Oh, napakalaging loob. Last week, tinatalakay na natin yan eh. Kaya kitang-kita ko natin sa buhay ni Chancellor Angela Merkel yan eh. Yung character niya. Siyempre, may mga failures siya. Oh, kaya nga, yun ang expect niyang tatanong sa kanya eh. She would have probably been honest about her failures as a leader. Failure as a person. Kaya lang siguro nakita nung mga tao, ng mga reporters, kung paano niya inalagaan, paano niya pinaangat ang kanilang bansa. Kaya parang hindi na pinansin ng mga tao yung kung ano man quote-unquote failure niya. Why? Character. Virtue. Yung what is inside her. Kung meron po tayong main scripture para sa pag-aaral natin sa portion po na ito ng ego is the enemy or managing our ego, is itong verse po na ito sa, kumbaga sa failure. In Proverbs 24 verse 16, in the Holman Christian Study Bible, it is rendered this way: though a righteous man falls 7 times, he will get up, but the wicked will stumble into ruin. Kapag isang taong matuwid, kahit ilang beses pang bumaksak, makakaangat. Pero ang isang taong sira sa buhay, wicked salbahe, masisira ang buhay. Kaya, tignan po natin ang libro ni Ryan Holiday, Ego is the Enemy. Ito pong sinulat niya. Here you are at the pinnacle. Angela Merkel, pinnacle, Prime Minister. What have you found? Just how tough and tricky it is to manage. You thought it would get easier when you arrived. Instead, it's even harder. Mahirap pala. Nakaangat ka na, masenso ka, successful ka Akala mo, smooth sailing na Hindi pala ganun kadali. What you found is that you must manage yourself in order to maintain your success. The philosopher Aristotle was not unfamiliar with the words of ego and power and empire. His most famous pupil was Alexander the Great, and partially through Aristotle's teachings, the young man conquered the entire known world. Alexander was brave and brilliant and often generous and wise. Maganda sana. Still, it's clear that he ignored Aristotle's most important lesson, and that's partially why he died at age 32, far from home, likely killed by his own men who had finally said, enough. Tama na. Grabe, hindi daw sinunod talaga. Merong portion sumunod si Alexander the Great sa kanyang mentor, si Aristotle. Kaya lang inignore niya yung isang importante lesson. It's not that he was wrong to have great ambitions. Okay, hindi masamang magkaroon ambisyon. Hindi masamang mag-aspire. Alexander just never grasped Aristotle's golden mean. Kumbaga balanse. That is the middle ground. Repeatedly, Aristotle speaks of virtue and excellence as points along a spectrum. Courage, for instance, ang sinuturo ni Aristotle, lies between cowardice on one end and recklessness on the other. Hindi puro sige, pataka na lang. Dahil courageous matapang ka, pataka. Hindi. Generosity which we all admire, must stop short of either profligacy, that is extravagance, or parsimony, which is stinginess, in order to be of any use. Kaya, magandang character, courage and generosity, and so on and so forth, kailangan matuto na malaman natin kung saan ina-apply siya. Where the line, this golden mean, can be difficult to tell, but without finding it, we risk dangerous extremes. Kaya, pwede ka mapunta sa isang cowardice or mapunta ka ng recklessness eh. No? Continuing, we can use the golden mean to navigate our ego and our desire to achieve. Kaya, minamanage natin yung ego eh. Yun ang forever na problem natin, yung self, yung ego. Endless ambition is easy. Anyone can put their foot down hard on the gas, di ba? Sa pedal. Complacency is easy too. It's just a matter of taking that foot off the gas. Para kapag nagmamaneho di ba? Kung gusto mong ambisyon, talaga mabilis, di apakan mo. Kung ayaw mong umandar, di huwag mong apakan. No? We must avoid what business strategist Jim Collins termed the undisciplined pursuit of more, as well as the complacency that comes with plaudits or recognitions. To borrow from Aristotle again, ang pagkasulat ni Ryan, what's difficult is to apply the right amount of pressure at the right time in the right way for the right period of time in the right car going in the right direction. Yung tamang-tamang apak lang. Kumbaga, sa tamang direksyon. If we don't do this, the consequences can be dire or terrible. So, tatlong example lang papakita ni Ryan eh. Una, si Alexander the Great, no, na hindi nakita yung mean, yung balance. Ang pangalawa ay si Napoleon, who died miserably like Alexander the Great. He said one time, sabi ni Napoleon Bonaparte, men of great ambition have sought happiness and have found fame. Yung mga ambisyoso, actually naghahanap lang naman sila quote-unquote ng kaligayahan. Kaya lang, kasikatan ng kanila nakuha. Naging sikat sila. What he means is that behind every goal is the drive to be happy and fulfilled. But when egotism takes hold, we lose track of our goal and end up somewhere we never intended. Diba? Yun ang problema ng ego eh. Gusto lang naman natin sana masaya sa umpisa. Maging fulfilled sa buhay. Kaya lang pag nauna yung ego, kumbaga nadidiskarel nga tayo, nawawala tayo dun sa ating patutunguhan. Ralph Waldo Emerson in his famous essay on Napoleon points out just a few years after po namamatay si Napoleon Bonaparte, itong pagkasabi ni Ralph Waldo Emerson, Europe was essentially exactly as it was before Napoleon began his precipitous rise or quick rise. Ang bilis ng pag-angat niya. All that death, that effort, that greed, those honors, for what? For basically nothing. Napoleon quickly faded away just like the smoke from his artillery. Para bang, yung lahat na na-acquire ni Napoleon, nawala. Para naging usok lang. Ang bilis nawala. No? Why? Ego is the enemy. And the third example ni Ryan dito sa portion na to is si Howard Hughes. Despite his current reputation as some kind of bold maverick, magaling naman sana siya, di ba? Napag-aralan natin siya eh. He was not a happy man, no matter how awesome his life may seem from history or movies. Di ba? Yung mga ginawang pelikula sa kanyang buhay, akala mo masaya eh. When he was near death, one of his aides sought to reassure a suffering Howard. Ang sabi nung kanyang aide, what an incredible life you have led. Ang ganda ng buhay mo. Ang ginawa daw po ni Howard Hughes, He shook his head and replied with the sad, emphatic honesty of someone whose time has clearly come. Anong pagkasabi ni Howard Hughes? Look at this. If you had ever swapped places in life with me, I would be willing to bet that you would have demanded to swap back before the passage of the first week. Huh? Parang sabi niya, siguro kung makikipagpalit ka, swap tayo ng buhay. Magbebet ako baka hindi ka tumagal na isang linggo dun sa klase ng buhay meron ako. Ha? Write down a comment. Ha? Meron ba tayong more or less parang ganung experience sa ating buhay? Until naayos lang po tayo. Akala natin, no, kagaya ni Aristotle, ni Napoleon, ni Howard Hughes, iba-ibang klaseng buhay meron sila. Pero, yun ang mga totoong failure sa buhay. May gamit ang failure sa buhay, kaya lang, parang sila, parang talagang, wala, failure lang. Kaya, paano po tayo magtatagumpay sa ating pong mga naging kamalian sa buhay? Proverbs 28 verse 13 reads, "One who conceals his wrongdoings will not prosper, but one who confesses and abandons them will find compassion." No, parang yan po ang sagot eh. Si Aristotle, si Napoleon, si Howard Hughes, hindi nila siguro tinanggap yung kanilang kamalian eh. Probably up to the end of their life, they thought they're good. Kaya wala sila nakuwang compassion sa buhay. Kaya pagkasulat ni Ryan, we do not have to follow in those footsteps. We know what decisions we must make to avoid the ignominious, minuse, or humiliating, even pathetic or pitiful, wretched, and protecting our sobriety, eschewing or avoiding greed and paranoia, staying humble, retaining our sense of purpose, connecting to the larger world around us. Yun po yung mga ways na pag-aralan po natin sa mga ilang studies po natin. Kaya kung gusto nyo po balikan yun, subscribe or go to our YouTube channel. At makikita nyo po dun yung mga last time na pag-aralan natin. Ito po pansinulat ni Ryan Holiday. I just wanted to show this to you. Instead of letting power make us delusional, and instead of taking what we have for granted, we'd be better to spend our time preparing for the shifts of fate that inevitably occur in life. That is adversity, difficulty, failure. Of course, hindi natin completely mapapagandaan talaga. Dahil may mga shifting sa buhay, may mga, kumbaga, kapalaran in one sense. May nangyayari talaga na hindi natin control. May magaganap whether kasalanan natin or gawa ng ibang tao sa ating buhay or natural disasters can happen no hindi natin control. Kaya sabi, minsan para bang pagandaan mo yung shift na ito. Hindi mo exactly mapiprepare talaga ng maayos na maayos, pero at least prepared ka sa loob. Ito, yung kalooban. Continuing, who knows? Maybe a downturn is exactly what's coming next. Worse, maybe you caused it. Just because you did something once doesn't mean you'll be able to do it successfully forever. Reversals and regressions are as much a part of the cycle of life as anything else, but we can manage that too. Ang tinuturo ni Ryan, hindi mo it's inevitable. May mga difficulties, afflictions, trials, failures that can happen. Ang importante, yung ego natin, ma-manage natin din yun. Part ng cycle ng buhay yun eh. Failure is an experience that lends to wisdom that ultimately makes you a stronger version of yourself. Di ba? Yung failure na yun, dahil nabibigyan ka ng karunungan sa buhay. Hindi kaalaman, knowledge lang. karunungan kung paano magdesisyon, karunungan kung paano basahin ang buhay, kaya tumitibay, stronger version eh. It's learning how to not get disappointed with failure and to understand failure itself. No? Grabe, no? Ganda po ng concept na yung portion na yun. Although, hindi ko po nakuha kay Ryan Holiday yun. Kaya Henry Ford, no? Sabi ni Henry Ford, failure is the opportunity to begin again more intelligently. Yun yung wisdom eh. No? Yung, dahil sa failure, makasimula ka, sige, okay lang, sumabit, nagkamali. Maski sabihin na natin, tayo may kasalanan, pero pwede kang makapagsimula ulit. Pero at least, kumbaga, more wise ka na sa iyong sitwasyon. Yes, the journey is hard. The journey is ridden with failure, and that's why most people don't do it. Most people are not willing to get on that journey. Why? Because they're afraid to fail. Ayaw na nilang maglakbay eh. Siguro dahil napaso na sila sa failure, kaya wag na lang. Ayaw na nilang, kumbaga, lumaban ulit o maglakbay ulit kasi wala, nag-fail na eh. Well, look at this statement. You have failed. Congratulations. The greatest thing that ever happened to you. Because it shows that you are alive, it shows that you did something, and it shows that you're growing together. That's why every time you fail, in one sense, kung kaibigan kita, kung kakilala kita, every time you fail, it means to me, it tells me that you are doing something. Ang aking tingin sa iyo, kung sakaling bumagsak ka, meron ka siguro kasing ginawa. Probably, hindi naman masamang ginawa. Kumbaga, sa nagkamali ka lang o nag-fail ka. So, may tinatry kang gawin. There's a story when Jim Bark became the head of the new products division at Johnson & Johnson Company. One of his projects was the development of a children's chest rub. Parang Vicks vapor rub, kumbaga siguro yon. The product failed miserably. Si Jim ang nagpakana nun. And Jim expected that he would be fired. Siyempre, laki ng lugi ng kumpanya eh. In-expect niya, so pinatawag siya para makita yung kausapin siya ng chairman of the board. And so, in-expect niya, wala na siya ng trabaho. Kaya lang nasurpresa siya kasi may magandang ang reception na binigay ng chairman of the board. Ang tanong lang sa kanya, are you the one who just cost us all that money, all that millions? Sabi ni Robert Wood Johnson. Nang sumagot si Jim Burke, yes, ako po. Alam niyo sagot ni Robert Wood Johnson. Well, I just want to congratulate you. If you are making mistakes, that means you are taking risk. And we won't grow unless you take risk. Grabe, no? Siguro, kung ako man si Jim Burke, siguro, wow, grabe, parang pinasalamatan yung pagkakamali ko. No? Laki ng lugi ng kumpanya doon. Pinasalamatan ako kasi ang tingin nung chairman of the board na, sige, nagtitake ka ng race. Makakaayos ka rin dyan. Makakabawi ka rin dyan. And some years later, si Jim Burke naging chairman na rin ng Johnson & Johnson. And he continued that word. Ganon din ang ginawa niya sa iba. Yung merong sumabit, na malaking naglugi ng kumpanya, kumbaga, pinasalamatan niya rin yung next na taong nagkamali. Ariana, Stasinopoulos, Huffington, sabi niya, she's a Greek-American author and she's the co-founder of the Huffington Post, isang respetado po na newspaper. Pagkasabi niya, failure is not the opposite of success. Failure is part of success. Diba? Parang, usually pag failure and success, parang opposite yan eh. Hindi, para kay Ariana, hindi. Bahagi yan. Ang failure, bahagi ng success. No? That's why here we are experiencing the trials common to any journey. Perhaps we have failed. Perhaps our goal turned out to be harder to achieve than anticipated. Para bang, ito pandemic. Ito, COVID Hindi mo akalain bigla kang mawawalan ng trabaho. Hindi mo akalain na itong difficulty na to na mangyayari sa iyo All the while, akala mo, paangat na iyong maliit na negosyo, biglang sabit, sara. No? May mga nagpo-post gano'n, malungkot kaya isa, pumunta na lang muna sa Maynila siya. Na-discourage siya dito sa GenSan. Parang feeling niya, wala siyang suporta o whatever. So anyway, siyempre, hindi ko naman alam completely kung anong story niya. Pero yun, subok na lang daw siya doon. Pagka medyo nakabawi-bawi siya doon, gusto niyang bumalik dito. At dito siya, gusto talagang manatili. Ryan Holiday, continued, no one, look at this, is permanently successful. And not everyone finds success on the first attempt. Bira-bira, siguro just in case na may mga umangat na isang umpisa pa lang, successful na sila. Wala ako sigurado na forever successful. Wala ako talagang, sabi mo, undefeated. At one time in your life, kahit yung mga undefeated na boxers na nag-retire as professional probably, pero prior to that, nung umpisa sila, sigurado natalo sila. We all deal with setbacks along the way. Sulat ni Ryan, ego not only lives us unprepared for these circumstances, it often contributed to their occurrence in the first place. No? Tayong minsan may kagagawan. Yung pride, yung ego, yung self. The way to rise again requires a reorientation and increased self-awareness. Yung bang nagkaroon ka ng pag-alam parang may nalaman ka, nabuksan ka. We don't need pity. Our own or anyone else's, we need purpose, we need poise, and we need patience. Grabe. Grabe ng ganda ng konsepto ni Ryan Holiday. Allow me to share to you a video clip. Ginawa po ito ni Tony Robbins. Tony Robbins is an American motivational speaker, life coach din ang tawag sa kanya, of what can you think about failure? Anong dapat pag-classify mo ng failure? Let's just watch this video clip.
I want you to know that failure can be your best friend. I mean, think about it. The greatest successes in the world are people who often had so much pain from a failure that it drove them to much greater success. Did you know those little 3M stickers, for example? Those ones that you see that you can put, I think they're called Post-it notes. You can write on them and put them on something and take it right off instantly. Do you know that was a result of a massive failure by the chemist? He was working at the time to create an adhesive that would last forever, something that you could never pry things apart with, and as a result, he came up with this stuff that didn't work at all. But he was smart enough to say, hey, what could I use this for? How could I use this supposed failure? And he turned it into a multi-million-dollar business. Lee Iacocca, most people would agree, is one of the more successful role models in our country. Now, I got a question for you. How come he's so successful? Because he's a wonder kid? Well, yeah, you could say that. He worked for a company called Ford Motor Company, and he worked his way through the ranks right up to the top, worked his tail off, was driven. What really marked him? His ability to get people to take action, his personal power. He developed skill because he was willing to try almost anything. He wouldn't accept no for an answer. But you know what? He had a little run-in with a guy by the name of Ford, and he fired him. And it burned him pretty good. Now, I got a question for you. Do you think when this company named Chrysler came by and they looked like for sure there was no way they could be turned around, do you think if he hadn't been fired by Ford that he would have taken it? You might say, oh, of course he would. That's the way Lee is. Well, I don't know. According to his wife, she said at the time, he said, honey, I don't think anybody could turn this thing around. She said, boy, well, I bet Mr. Ford will be real happy to hear that. That's all it took. He was so angry from the pain and failure of his past, quote-unquote failure, that he was going to show him that it wasn't his failure, that Mr. Ford made the mistake. Another company that's mentioned, IBM. It all started because a guy by the name of Tom Watson, who worked for a competing company called NCR, got fired by the CEO there also. He got so mad, he said, I'm going to develop a company that will dwarf yours someday. See, welcome frustration. I got to tell you something. When I get frustrated, I've learned to get excited. I've learned to literally condition myself so that frustration creates excitement. You know why? Because when I'm frustrated, I know I'm about to have a breakthrough. It means my brain is searching. If I get confused about something, instead of going, I'll never learn this, my response to that is, hey, I'm about to learn something. Because my brain is searching for a new answer. And if it keeps searching, it's going to come up with one. I believe the emotions that many of us consider negative, like frustration and rejection and pain, can be our greatest friends because they can drive us to success. You know what? Listen, when people succeed, they tend to party. When they fail, they tend to ponder. Now, the pondering, many times we create our greatest successes in life. Just remember, it's impossible to fail. If you try something and it doesn't work, just try something else and learn something from what you just did. As long as you learn something, you've succeeded.
Grabe, ang ganda ng concept ni Tony Robbins. I like it so much. Diba? Portion dun, kung narinig nyo mabuti, or sabi niya, I want you to know that failure can be your best friend. Sabi, no? Failure ang kanyang best friend. The greatest successes in the world are often people who had so much pain from a failure that it drove them to much greater success. Dahil iba ang attitude nila sa failure. No? Kaya nagbigay siya ng 3 examples. Of course, 3M stickers, yung post-it notes yun. Ano? It is a result of a massive failure. And naging $1 billion, multi-million dollar rather, na business. Up to now, may gumagamit yan. Ang second example ni Tony Robbins, si Lee Iacocca ng Ford Company. Ang galing niya magtrabaho, maayos siya, meron siyang ability to get people to take action, personal power, he develops skill. Grabe siya, maayos siya magtrabaho. At ang reward sa kanya, finire. No? Siguro kung tayo grabe naman. Nagtrabaho naman ako ng maayos, bakit ako tinanggal? Yung iba dyan, di nagtatrabaho na maayos, sila yung napopromote. Diba? It goes in the government, it goes in private, it goes in everywhere. Lagi nangyayari yun. Na-fire out siya. Kaya di ba, pagkasulat ni Tony Robbins, siguro, kukunin kagad siya ng Chrysler. Kumbaga, parang sana sila. Kaya lang sabi ni Lee Iacocca, honey, sabi niya sa asawa niya, I don't think anybody can turn this thing around. Ang ganda ng pagkasabi ng asawa, ang galing mag-encourage ng asawa in a subtle way. Ang sagot lang ng asawa, boy, well, o nga. But I bet, sigurado ko, Mr. Ford will be happy to hear that. Na, kumbaga, failure na siya. Wala nang yung mangyari sa buhay niya. Nung nakita na bigla nabuksan, yun yung awareness eh. Nagkaroon siya ng pangitainis sa kanyang buhay. Biglang na-aware siya. Oo nga, no? Imagine, lalong matutuwa yung nag-fire sa akin kung hindi ako makakuha ng trabaho. Kaya, ang pagkasabi ni Tony, he was so angry from the pain of failure of his past, that he was gonna show him that it wasn't his failure, that Mr. Ford made the mistake. At totoo naman, paglipat niya sa Chrysler, pinaangat niya ang Chrysler. No? Kaya di ba sinasabi, you cannot put a good man down. No matter how much you try to put a good person. Kaya yung character, yung sasabi ni Theodore Roosevelt, success and failure, ang chief factor dyan, character eh. No, kung hindi magandang karakter, talaga matitibag siya. Pero kung magandang karakter, kahit anong pag-push mo sa kanya, hindi, aangat pa rin yan. Ganon din nangyari kay Tom Watson. No? Tinanggal siya ng NCR at kinuha siya ng IBM. So probably hindi tayo man familiar sa NCR. No? Ang ating NCR, National Capital Region. Pero IBM, sikat na sikat at naging CEO pa siya ng IBM. Kaya yun din, he got angry, he was so mad. In a good sense, yung galit na to, I'm gonna develop a company that will dwarf yours someday. Which is, it came to pass. Sobrang laki ng IBM na wala, natabunan ng NCR. Kaya, ang ganda ng pagkaano ni Tony Robbins, welcome frustration. Tanggapin mo, i-welcome mo ang frustration. No? Na sabi niya, when I get frustrated, I've learned to get excited. Galing, ano? Frustrated to be excited. No? Why? When I'm frustrated, I know I'm about to have a breakthrough. Huh? No, yung portion na frustrate siya, karoon siya ng failure, babalik ulit siya makakaangat po rin. Why? Character. Oh? If I get confused about something instead of going, I'll never learn this. My response is that, hey, I'm about to learn something. Kaya siya nakakaangat kasi lagi doon sa mga failures or mistakes or tragedy, difficulties, adversities, obstacles, challenges, call it whatever. No? Ang iniisip niya, I'm about to learn something. Meron akong matututuhan dito. That's why sabi niya, I believe the emotions that many of us consider negative like frustration and rejection and pain can be our greatest friends because they can drive us to success. That's why, maganda po itong quotation niya, no? When people succeed, they tend to party. When they fail, they tend to ponder. Napag-iisip sila Di ba? Pagka tagumpay, parang, wow, happy. Ano tayo? Party tayo, kumbaga. No? Kumbaga, hayahay success Pero pagka failure, di ba, bigla ka nag-iisip Bigla kang parang magkukondemn, biglang mag-internalize ka No? Yun ang ginawa niya. That's why, for Tony Robbins, as long as you've learned something, you have succeeded. Basta may natutukan ka lang. Nag-succeed ka na. At least in a small way. So, do you have any experiences like that? Yung from your own failures, eto ka na, angat ka dahil sa iyong mga failures sa buhay. Sabi, I hope na wag natin sayangin yung failure. Wag natin, kumbaga, itapon lang yung failures na yan na nangyari. Kung sakasakaling nandiyan ka ngayon sa kasalukuyan na failure sa iyong buhay, wag mo sayangin, tanggapin mo bilang best friend. Kasi yan ang magtutulak sa iyo para pag-angat. Ganda-ganda. That's why, kung babalikan natin yung unang portion natin, to whatever failure and challenges you will face, ego is the enemy. And ang ganda-ganda po ng kwento na binigay ni Ryan Holiday tungkol po sa kay Catherine Mayer Graham. For the first half of her life, Catherine Mayer Graham saw pretty much everything go right. Maayos. Her father, Eugene Mayer, was a financial genius who made a fortune in the stock market. Her mother was beautiful as well as a brilliant socialite. As a child, Catherine had the best of everything, the best schools, the best teachers, the best houses, and servants to wait on her. No? Hindi kagaya ni Angela Merkel, walang helper. Mahirap. Ito si Catherine Graham, o Mayer Graham, angat. Maayos ang pamumuhay financially. In 1933, her father bought the Washington Post, a newspaper, then a struggling but important newspaper, which he began to turn around. Magaling din sa negosyo yung tatay. The only child to express any serious interest in it, Catherine inherited the paper when she was older and handed over the management to her equally impressive husband, Philip Graham. Magaling din sana una yung asawa niya. She was not another Howard Hughes who squandered her family's fortune. Di ba? Sa pag-aaral natin kay Howard Hughes, di ba? Kung ano-anong ginawa doon sa negosyo na minamana sa kanya ng tatay niya. She was not another rich kid who took the easy road in life because she could. But it was a cushy or an easy, comfortable life. Talagang, mayaman talaga eh. No question about it. She had been, in her words, content to be the tail to her husband's kite. Kumbaga, parang na lang sana siya, ayaw niya manguna. Then, life took a turn. Eto na. Ito na yung sinasabi ng mga quotations natin na meron darating, sasabi ni Ryan, meron darating na biglang trahedya. Philip Graham's behavior became increasingly erratic. He drank heavily, he made reckless business decisions and bought things they couldn't afford, he began having affairs, he publicly humiliated Catherine in front of nearly everyone they knew. It turns out that he had suffered a severe mental breakdown, and as Catherine attempted to nurse him back to health, he killed himself with a hunting rifle while she napped in the next room. Pakamatay yung asawa. In 1963, at age 46 years old, Catherine Graham, a mother of 3 with no work experience, found herself in charge of the Washington Post Company, a vast corporation with thousands of employees. She was unprepared, timid, and naive. How would you want to be trusted into that kind of a job? Wala kang kaalam-alam. Napuwersa siya tuloy. Though tragic, these events were not exactly cataclysmic or devastating failure for her, because Catherine was still rich, still white, still privileged. Still, it was not what she thought life had planned for her. Yun, hindi niya akalain, yun ang darating sa kanyang buhay eh. Kaya yun na sinasabi ni Ryan Holiday, kahit paano, maganda ka, mag-prepare ka. Kaya yun ang tinuturo na, di ba, sa atin na ihanda natin yung ating mga anak. Huwag natin ipamper ang ating mga anak. Huwag mo ibigay lahat sa iyong mga anak para kahit paano, kung just in case may mangyari sa atin, kaya nilang mabuhay. No? Yun ang parenting. No? Ryan Holiday wrote, look at this, failure and adversity are relative and unique to each other. Kumbaga magkamag-anak yan, pero may uniqueness. Almost without exception, this is what life does. It takes our plans and dashes them to pieces. Sometimes once, sometimes lots of times. Grabe, no? Kayo ba meron ganun sa inyong buhay? Hindi lang once nangyari, kundi grabe, no? Para bang sa stage na to, paulit-ulit, para bang, kung siguro kung nananalangin ka, Panginoon, hanggang kailan ba ito? Diba? Parang ganun. Ganong katagal pa ba ito? Parang ang tagal na nitong nangyayari na ito. Parang hindi lang isa, dalawa, paulit-ulit, dagdag ng dagdag. No? Grabe, ilang beses minsan nangyayari sa ating buhay. You have any experience like that? Ryan Holiday again, if success is ego intoxication, then failure can be a devastating ego blow. Yun, maganda yun. Yung failure kumbaga, ang ego na de-devastate. Nasasapak, kumbaga, ang ego. Ang self natin turning slips into falls and little troubles into great unravelings. Kumbaga, na-expose yung self na-expose yung kahinaan natin, na-expose yung yung mga pinapahalagahan natin, na-expose yung character natin, na-expose yung attitude natin sa buhay, na-expose yung ating perception sa buhay, na-expose yung kung ano pala ang purposes natin sa ating buhay. If ego is often just a nasty side effect of great successes or success, it can be fatal during failure. Delikado. As Ryan continued, we have many names for these problems. Sabotage, unfairness, adversity, trials, tragedy. No matter the label, it's a trial. We don't like it. And some of us are sunk by it. Others seem to be built to make it through. In either case, it's a trial each person must endure. Dadaanan natin. Whether kayang-kaya mo o halos malugmok ka, dadaanan natin yon. Bawat isa sa atin. Kaya, kung pagpapatuloy ang kwento, that's what came to Katharine Graham. It turned out that taking over the paper was the first in a series of trying and wrenching events that lasted for 2 decades. 20 taon. Grabe hirap. Hindi madali yun, 20 taon. As she settled in her leadership position, Graham found that the paper's conservative board was a constant obstacle. Ayaw ng change siguro ng board na yun. They were patronizing and risk-averse and had held the company back. Ayaw ng risk. To succeed, she would have to develop her own compass and not differ to others the way she always had. Yung bang sigla, pagbigyan na lang, hindi, ayaw na niya. Biglang tumibay. It eventually became clear that she needed a new executive editor. Against the board's advice, she replaced the well-liked good old boy with an unknown young upstart. Simple enough. Actually, meron pong palabas yan Si Meryl Streep ang Catherine dyan. At saka yung kumbaga executive editor po na kinuha niya, si Tom Hanks po. The next turn of the screw wasn't. Just as the company was filing to go public, IPO, yung talagang sila, the Post received a collection of stolen government documents that editors asked Graham if they could run, despite a court order preventing their publication. She consulted the company's lawyers. She consulted the board. All advised against it. Fearing it could sink the IPO or tie the company up in lawsuits for years. Torn, she decided to proceed and publish them, a decision with essentially no precedent. Grabe, documents At magugulat ko kayo po anong mga documents yun. Shortly thereafter, the paper's investigation of a burglary at the Democratic National Committee's headquarters, relying on anonymous source, threatened to put the company permanently at odds with the White House and Washington's powerful elite, as well as jeopardizing the government licenses they needed for the TV stations the Post owned. At one point, Nixon loyalist and Attorney General of the United States John Mitchell threatened that Graham had so overreached that her teeth was going to be caught in a big fat ringer. Another side bragged that the White House was now thinking about how to screw the paper over. Put yourself in her shoes, sabi ni Ryan, the most powerful office in the world, explicitly strategizing how can we hurt the Post the most. Sisirain yung kanyang kumpanya. On top of that, the Post stock price was lesser than stellar. The market was poor. In 1974, an investor began aggressively buying up shares in the company. The board was terrified. Biglang may bumibili. Mukhang i-overtake. Iti-take over. Graham was dispatched to deal with that person. The following year, the paper's printers union began a vicious, protracted strike. At one point, union members wore t-shirts, nakalagay sa t-shirt ng mga union members, mga empleyado, Phil, yung kanyang asawa, Phil Graham, shot the wrong Graham. Hindi dapat yung sarili niya, binaril niya, dapat si Catherine, kumbaga. Despite or perhaps because of these tactics, she decided to fight the strike. They fought back. At 4 o'clock one morning came a frantic call. The union had sabotaged company machinery, beaten up an innocent staffer, and then set one of the printing presses on fire. Typically, during printing strikes, competitors will help fellow papers out with their printing, but Graham's competitors refused, costing the Post $300,000 a day in advertising revenue. Grabe, lugi sana. Malulugi na malulugi. Then a suite of major investors began to sell their stock positions in Washington Post Company, ostensibly having lost their faith in the prospects. Graham, pushed by the activist mentor she'd met with earlier, decided her own option was to spend an enormous amount of the company's money to buy back its own shares on the public market. So siya na lang ang bumili. Oh, sabi, ang ganda ng pagkasulat ni Ryan, that's a list of problems exhausting to read about, let alone live through. Nabasahin mo lang, nakakapagod dahil ang daming problema eh. Lalo na, ikaw pa yung mabuhay nung panahon na yun. Imagine years, 20 years. Yet, pagkasulat ni Ryan, because of Graham's perseverance, it shook out better than anyone could have possibly predicted. Grabe, nakaalis sila doon. Nagtagumpay sila in the midst of the failure, the tragedy, the difficulties, sabotage, everything. Kaya ang ganda na sabi rin po ni Bruce Lee. No need to tell who he is. This guy, sabi niya, it is not what happens that is success and failure, but what it does to the heart of man. No, kaya, grabe, parang konektado kay Theodore Roosevelt. Theodore Roosevelt sabi, the chief factor ng success and failure, yung heart. No? Ito naman kay Bruce Lee, kumbaga, success ba yan o failure? Hindi, depende yan kung anong nangyari doon sa puso ng tao. No, sa ating failure, sa ating success or failure, ano nangyari sa atin? Kasi pwedeng success nga, delikado. Pwede tayong gumabang in the midst of success eh. Or in the midst of failure, kumbaga kaya iba, pakamatay na lang. Anong nangyari sa puso? Anong ginawa nung either success or failure in your heart? Do you have any comment on that? That's why you look at this statement, failure, or it is the greatest joy in life because it says so much about my character, and it adds so much to who you are becoming. Grabe, no? Failure can become the greatest joy. Weird, normally, pag sinabing failure, di ba, dapat sad ka, malungkot ka. Pagka failure, dapat devastated ka. Dapat pagka failure, dapat, kumbaga, natigang ka na or whatever, nasira ka na. Pero failure can be your greatest joy. Bakit? Kasi something happens inside in your character, in your heart. Yun ang sasabi ni Bruce Lee. Nagiging kung ano ka. What are you becoming because of that failure? Have we become humble, more humble in life? Love it for what it is. Because, look at this, if you didn't fail, you would never be able to appreciate success. Galing naman mga statements po na yan. I got this from somewhere else. Kaya, write a comment. What had failure done in your life? Dahil sigurado naman ako nag-fail kayo eh. Nag-fail ako. At kung sakasakaling hindi pa kayo nag-fail, bukas mag-fail na kayo. Kumbaga, sigurado ko mag-fail kayo kung sakasakaling hindi pa. Kung sa tingin mo hindi ka pa nag-fail. One of these days, I don't know when actually, but you will fail. I will fail. I will still fail. You will still fail. The point is, anong reaction natin sa mga failures na yan? That's why Psalm 145 verse 14, ito yung pananaw ng isang salmista, isang musician, isang singer. The Lord supports all who fall and raises up all who are bowed down. Kaya, kumbaga pag nagpakababa tayo sa Diyos, kahit anumang klaseng failure nangyari sa ating buhay, whether moral failure or business failure, relational failure, whatever kind of failure, pag nagpakababa tayo, iaangat tayo ng Panginoon. Continuing si Catherine, the leaked documents, ito na po, Catherine Graham published became known as the Pentagon Papers. and were one of the most important stories in the history of journalism. The paper's Watergate reporting. No? Kaya kung may edad po kayo na alam nyo yung Watergate issue na yan that led to the resignation of Richard Nixon. The paper's Watergate reporting, which so incensed the Nixon White House, changed American history and took down an entire administration. It also won the paper a Pulitzer Prize. The investor others had feared turned out to be the young Warren Buffett pala, yung nag-invest aggressively, who became her business mentor and an enormous advocate and steward of the company. The small investments in her family's company would one day be worth hundreds of millions. Magaling sa investment kasi si Warren Buffett. No? She prevailed in negotiations with the union and the strike eventually ended. Her main competitor in Washington, the one that had refused to come to her aid, the Star, suddenly folded and was acquired by the Post. Grabe, no? Sometimes yung comedy ng buhay, di ba? Yung ayaw tumulong sa'yo, nagsara. Na-acquire na niya, siya na may-ari. No? Kaya yan ang buhay eh. Ang buhay hindi lang yung, para sa akin, yung bang natuwa ka na nagsara siya, ay salamat, nagsara sila, aangat kami. Di ba? Ang envy po ay hindi lang yun dahil nainggit tayo doon sa kung ano yung meron ng tao. Ang mas lalong grabing concept ng envy ay natutuwa tayo sa kasiraan nangyayari sa ibang tao. Yung po yung envy and covetousness. Yung bang yung covet, kinukovet mo yung, hindi lang yung kung ano meron sila, kinukovet mo na sana masira sila. Yun probably ang nangyari doon sa Star ay buti nga kalabak, competitor yan. Huwag natin tulungan. Sira sila. O sila nagsara. No? Grabe. And so that's kumbaga the issue of life. Ang buhay hindi yung akong pakinabang. Ang buhay, masaya ako pagka nakikinabang. Hindi totoong kasayahan yun. No? Panandalian lang yun. Makasariling kaligayahan lang yun. Hindi nagtatagal. Kaya kung marunong tayo sa buhay at tumutulong tayo sa tao, magugulat ka, yun ang totoong kaligayahan. Her stock paybacks made contrary not only to business wisdom but the judgment of the market made the company billions of dollars. Nakabawi. Umangat sila. Kaya up to now, ang Washington Post kilala. Winston Churchill said, "Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts." That's what happened kay Catherine Graham. Courage. Courage, hindi yung kumbaga recklessness, Pinag-iisipan niya yung golden mean ni Aristotle. It turns out that the long, hard slog or trek she endured, the mistakes she made, and the repeated failures, crises, and attacks were all leading somewhere. Kaya sabi ni Ryan, if you invested $1 in the Post IPO in 1971, it would be worth $89 by the time Graham stepped down in 1993. Kaya, di ba kaya siya sabi, when we humble ourselves before the Lord, God will raise us up. I don't know if Catherine did that before the Lord. But I'm talking about if we Christians, whoever you are, if we humble ourselves before the Lord, somehow ipapaangat tayo ng Lord. It makes her not just one of the most successful female CEOs of her generation and the first to run a Fortune 500 company, but one of the best CEOs ever, period. For someone born with a silver spoon in her mouth, the first decade and a half was what you've called a baptism of fire. Bininyagan siya ng apoy Ang hirap nung umpisa niya, no? Kung pagkapasa ng tatay niya sa kanya, patay ang asawa, nagkagulo-gulo, 20 taon, grabe. Graham faced difficulty after difficulty, difficulties that she wasn't really equipped to handle, and so it seemed. There were times when it probably felt like she would just sold the damn thing and enjoy her massive wealth. Pwede na lang sana, binenta na lang niya, total mayaman pa rin naman siya eh. Kahit naman nagkasira-sira, mayaman pa rin siya eh. Kaya lang siguro, hawa siya sa mga empleyado. Hawa siya sa mga tao niya. Ayaw niyang pabayaan yung mga tao. Siguro, yung nga eh, yung bang may malasakit eh. Doon natin nakikita ang isang leader eh. Whatever, leader ng bansa, leader ng kumpanya, leader ng pamilya, natalakay natin yan, di ba? Malasakit sa tao. Angela Merkel. That's why, no, hindi tinignan ng mga tao, ng mga journalists, yung kanyang mga supposed failures. Hindi kailangan itanong. Dahil alam nila na itong tao na to, bansa ang nasa puso. Paano makakaangat yung mga tao? Paano paangatin ang buhay ng mga tao? Hindi lang tayong manalo sa buhay. Yes, we need to win in life. We need to, kailangan natin umangat, makaasenso sarili na. Pero wag lang tayo, kailangan inisip din natin, paano ko ba isasama yung iba sa akin tagumpay? At yung probably si Catherine. Yes, mayamang pa rin siya. Pero kung iniwan niya yun, paano naman yung mga tao niya maghihikahos? No? That's why, ito kapag marunong tayong magpasakop sa Panginoon, itong sabi ng Psalm 37 verses 23 and 24, gustong-gusto ko itong verses na to. A man's steps are established by the Lord, and he takes pleasure in his way. Though he falls, he will not be overwhelmed because the Lord holds his hand. Ang lakbayin ng isang matuwid na nagpapakababa sa Panginoon. Inaalagaan ng Diyos, iaayos yung lakbayan niya, yung kanyang mga steps, ino-ordain, inaayos ng Panginoon, pati yung mga hinto. Ganyan ang ng isang kilala si George, I forgot his pero yun the Lord ordains the steps and the stops. Si George Mueller, yun, pangalan niya. The Lord, hindi lang in-order ng Lord yung mga steps mo, pati yung paghinto. Why? Kasi kagalakan ng Diyos yun eh. Why? Kasi hawak-hawak ka ng Panginoon eh. That's why Fred Smith, a business executive, siya yung CEO founder ng FedEx. Pagka sigurado alam niyo yung courier na yan. Success doesn't mean everything in our lives has turned out well. You can be successful in coming back from a fall. Yun ang nangyari kay Catherine. Nakapanumbalik siya galing sa pagkabaksak. Hindi naman naubos yung pera niya, pero failure, di ba? Parang nag-fail siya in a sense eh. Graham or Catherine didn't cause her husband's suicide, but it was left to her to carry on without him. She didn't ask for Watergate and the Pentagon Papers, but it fell on her to navigate their incendiary or flammable nature. While others went on buying and merger sprees in the 80s, she didn't. She doubled down on herself and her own company despite the fact that it was treated as a weakling by Wall Street. She could have taken away easy 100 times but did not. Hindi niya iniwan. Basta dumating, hindi naman niya iningi yung Washington, yung Watergate at saka Pentagon Papers eh. Dumating sa kanila sila. Siguro katiwa-tiwala yung kanyang newspaper. Kaya doon binaano sa kanila yung mga leak na yun eh. Because at any given moment, there is the chance of failure and setbacks. That's why you want to be really happy in your life. Ang question is, what is my gift that I can help the world? Ano yung kaloob sa akin na makatulong ako sa mundo, sa tao? Hindi lang para sa akin sarili. Hindi lang panaluhin ko sarili ko, kundi panaluhin ko ibang tao. Yun ang kaligayahan sa buhay. Hindi kagaya nung, di ba, star na newspaper. Ayaw nilang tulungan. No, normal naman kasi siyang, maski competitor sila, pagka nagkakaproblema, natutulungan sana siya. Kaya lang, wala. Gusto nilang sumabit yung Washington Post. O di sila sumabit. Ha? Grabe. Yun ang panawagan sa buhay. You want to be really happy in life? What is your gift that can help the world? Parang yung kay Catherine, pumaksak na lang sa kanya eh. Anong gagawin ko dito? Itatapon ko ba ito? Hindi ko ba ilalabas ito? Delikado kami. Maapektuhan kami. Masisira kami. Baka pasara kami. No, pero meron ka lang kasi naman lumalakad naman sila sa tama. Hindi naman dahil salbahin sila kaya pwede niyang itago. Hindi. Kaya niya nilabas yun dahil sigurado matuwid ang kanilang lakarin. Kaya sa kanila ibinigay yung mga papeles na yun eh. Kaya lang naiintindihan niya, may bahagi ako eh. At magiging masaya ako, maligaya ako dito kapag ginawa ko yung bahagi ko. No? Bill Walsh, professional coach, football coach ito, na daanan na rin natin siya at one time. Ang ganda ng pagkasabi niya, almost always your road to victory goes through a place called failure. Almost always, dadaan ka palagi sa failure. Again, write down ang comment. Meron ba tayong ganong klaseng experiences sa buhay na may victory tayo pero dumaan tayo sa mga failure sa buhay. Ryan Holiday continued, look at this. In order to taste success again, we've got to understand what led to this moment or these years of difficulty. What went wrong and why? We must deal with the situation in order to move past it. We'll need to accept it and to push through it. Kaya patuloy yung sulat niya, Graham was alone in most of this eh. She was blindly feeling her way through the dark. Hindi niya alam eh. Kumbaga, wala siyang experience eh. Trying to figure out a tough situation she never expected to be in. She's an example of how you can do most everything right and still find yourself in deep trouble. Diba? Tama. Okay rin naman ang puso niya eh. Ayaw naman niya manloko rin siguro ng tao, lalo siguro mga empleyado niya. Kaya lang, wala, deep trouble pa rin siya eh. Kumbaga, when we think about failure, what comes into our minds? Diba? Parang, kumbaga, yung mga egomaniacs, dapat, kumbaga, masira. Kagaya, kumbaga, ni Nixon daw. Hindi si Graham. The reality is that while, yes, often people set themselves up to crush, good people fail. Or other people fail them in all the time too. People have already been through a lot, find themselves stuck with more. Life isn't fair. Hindi pantay eh. Hindi fair. But the question is, who told you life is fair? Na kahit gaano ka kabuti, kahit tama ang ginagawa mo, who told you life will be fair? Who told you na walang manloloko sa'yo? Who told you na hindi ka dadaan sa mga hirap sa buhay? That's why, although life is not fair, what should be our reaction? The book of Proverbs has a word for that. Proverbs 24 verse 10, if you falter, in the NIV, in a time of trouble, how small is your strength? Pagka natibag ka sa gitna ng trouble, ang hiliit ng iyong kalakasan. In the New American Standard Bible, it is rendered this way, if you show yourself lacking courage on the day of distress, your strength is meager. Life will be unfair. So, kinakailangan merong tayong lakas sa loob na malalabanan natin kung ano man yung hamon ng buhay. Kung ano man ang dumating na dagok, na suntok, kumbaga, lalabanan natin. Kumbaga, hindi tayo basta-basta papatinag. Ryan continued, ego loves this notion, the idea that something is fair or not. Diba? Whether what you're going through is your fault or your problem doesn't matter because it's yours to deal with right now. Kaya Graham's ego didn't cause her to fail. But if she had won, it certainly would have prevented her from succeeding ever again. Hindi naman siya ang naging dahilan ng kanyang failure o setbacks or whatever. Hindi dahil sa ego niya. Ginawa ng ibang mga tao. Kaya kung may ego siya, ay wala, baka hindi na siya nakaahon. Ryan Holiday said, you could say that failure always arrives uninvited. But through our ego, far too many of us allow it to stick around. Gabing galing. Uninvited yung trouble, yung failure. Hindi mo namang iniimbita eh. Hindi mo namang iniisip na, magpe-fail ako, gusto kong mag-fail. Hindi mo naman hinahangad talaga mag-fail, kaya lang inaalaw mo lang na, sige, tatanggapin mo kung sakaling magkaroon ng failure. Kaya lang ang ego, pananatiliin yun. What did Graham need through all this? Not swagger or arrogance, not bluster or rage. She needed to be strong. She needed confidence and a willingness to endure, a sense of right and wrong, purpose. It wasn't about her. It was about preserving her family's legacy, protecting the paper, doing her job. Kaya yung Proverbs 24 verse 10, kinuha ko rin sa dalawa pang translation. In the English Standard Version, if you faint in the day of adversity, your strength is limited or small. No? In the Holman Christian Study Bible, if you do nothing in a difficult time, your strength is limited. Grabe, ang ganda-ganda. Isang scripture, iba-ibang translation ko po ginawa. What about you? Will your ego betray you when things get difficult, or can you proceed without it? When we face difficulty, particularly public difficulty, doubters, scandals, losses, our friend, the ego will show its true colors. Ang sasabihin ng ego na, it's not worth it. Bakit ka pa magsusubok? Life is unfair eh. Yun ang sasabihin ng ego, yun ang papasok sa isip mo. Bakit ka pa mag-asaya? Make a good excuse, wash your hands. Iwan mo na lang yan. Bakit ka palalaban? Parang ganun na ego eh. Supposed to be parang ego, parang matapang eh. Pero ayaw niya ng difficulty kasi it's self-protection. No? Pero actually nakakadagdag sa injury yun eh. Reshma Saujani, an American lawyer and politician, embracing failure is the most important trait I've developed in my career. I have tried to learn from my failures, and I believe it made me stronger, more confident, and more resilient. Do you have any experiences like that? Yung mga failures natin, ano nangyari sa atin? Tama ang pananaw. Write it down. Natutong magmahal ng ibang tao. Write it down. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe said, American writer, the great failing is to see yourself as more than you are, and to value yourself at less than your true worth. Yung ang talagang pagkabaksak sa buhay, yung sobrang taas ang tingin mo na hindi ka naman ganun. O minsan sobrang baba naman, na hindi mo na nakita yung true value mo at worth mo. Di ba, merong mga gano'n, hindi, wala, ganito lang ako, di ba, makikiraan lang, lagi na kayo kung gano'n. Maganda yung parang humble yung, pero para bang, ang baba na masyadong, ganito lang ako, pobre lang ako, wala, mahina lang ako, wala akong alam. Minsan naman yung iba, sobrang taas naman natingin sa sarili. Kaya, hindi ko na basahin, kaya binili ulit ni Catherine, yung stock, para maipakita, kasi ang market, ang mga tao, ang baba ng tingin sa kanyang kumpanya. Kaya niya binili para maipakita at tulong ni Warren Buffett, nakaangat sila at laki milyon-milyon ng kanilang kinita. The stock that Catherine bought for approximately $20 a share would less than a decade later be worth more than $300. Kaya umangat siya. This is what guides us through difficulty. Kaya malapit na po ako matapos. You might not get into your first choice college. Di ba? Yung dream mo na college, yung dream mo na course hindi nangyari. You might not get picked for the project, or you might not get passed over the promotion. Someone might outbid you for the job, for your dream house, for the opportunity you feel everything depends on. This might happen tomorrow. It might happen 25 years from now. It could last for 2 minutes or 10 years. We know that everyone experiences failure and adversity, and that we're all subject to the rules of gravity and averages. What does that mean to you? It means we'll face them too. Haharapin mo. Hindi lahat ng dreams mo nangyayari. Meron po kami mag-asama, katatapos lang po namin panoorin isang K-drama, ang title Good Doctor. Isang episode po na, kasi po yung mga doktor po sila, ang kanilang, yung kanila pong pediatric or children's ward, kilala po. Sikat, magagaling mga doktor, magaling sila mag-opera. Meron pong dumating na sa kanila nang hingi ng tulong na isang Korean po na bata na baseball player po siya at dreaming of becoming a professional baseball player. Nagkaroon po ng problema sa utak. Tumor or something, merong growth or whatever. So, inirefer sa kanila kasi pediatric, magaling sila sa bata. Nasa Boston yung bata. Yun ang istorya po, no? So, yung mga doctors doon, nanghingi ng comment, ito, pinadala nila, yung tingin nilang pwedeng gawin. So, pinag-usap-usap sila eh. Mga doktor, nagdi-discuss sila. So, ayaw operahan ng mga American doctors. Ang feeling nila, very risky. So, ang suggestion, balik na lang sa Korea, yung bata, at itong hospital na to, dito sa hospital na to, na pinasok. Actually, yung tatay nitong bata, dating nagtatrabaho doon. May mga issues and everything. Dati siya nagtatrabaho doon sa as an vice or assistant administrator nung hospital po na yon. And so, pinag-usapan, and una, ayaw nung tatay, sana po parang hindi siya believe doon sa mga doktor. No, dati siyang worker doon, pero hindi siya believe. Gusto niya ipadala na lang sa Japan dahil merong kilala na magaling. So, anyway, okay lang ito mga, syempre, medyo offending dito sa mga doktor eh. No, Korean, doon dinala, pero doon siya dati nagtatawa. Kaya lang, sige lang, respect. Sige, ikaw, anak mo yan eh. Decision mo yan. Kaya lang yung bata napalapit na doon sa mga doktor at gusto niya itong mga doktor na itong mag-opera sa kanya. And so, yung nga, pinag-aralan at na-opera siya, and it turned out to be a successful operation. No? Ang pangalan ng bata si Jun Yong. So, yung isa sa mga doctors na nag-opera sa kanya, attending physician niya, si Doktora, no? Yoon Seo. No? At sabi niya, Jun Yong, the surgery went well, but there's something I haven't told you yet. Ang tanong ng bata, what is it? Sabi ng doktora, it will be hard for you to play baseball from now on. You shouldn't move abruptly. Mahirapan ka na maglaro. Hindi pwedeng mabilisan ang takbo eh. O baka sakaling hindi na lang diniretsa pa na, sabi niya, baka hindi ka na makalaro. Ang sagot ng bata, I knew that. Nagulat yung doktor, how? Bakit? So kinuwento niya ang istorya na merong isa, yung pinaka-head ng pediatric ward, yung mga chief nila o yung mentor nila, coach nila, professor nila tawag, si Dr. Kim Do-han, bumisita one time dito sa bata. Usap sila, dream ng bata, bla bla. Tapos, sa mga isang bisita niya, binigay ng bata ang isang bola ng baseball dito kay Dr. Kim Do-han. At sabi ng bata, ito yung bola na unang-una nung na hit, na home run niya, yun yung unang-unang So, kinuha ng bata, ng doktor. Pagkatapos ng operation, bumalik itong si Dr. Kim Do-han. At sabi niya dito sa bata, Jun Yong, I know you're sad that you cannot fulfill your dream. But you know what's good about dreams? That you can have another dream. Yung dream natin hindi na accomplish. Pero pwede ka pa magkaroon ng dream. Hindi ibig sabihin na hindi na-accomplish yung dream mo, tapos na, wala ka na, hindi ka na pwede mag-dream. Sabi niya, kagabi, meron kang dream. Mamaya, pwedeng ibang dreams na naman. No? You can dream. No? You can dream new ones. Tapos ang ginawa ni Dr. Kim Do-han, nilabas niya yung bola at pinahawak na dito sa bata. At sabi niya, look, the ball from your first hit, you can make new first again. Whatever it is, you have to give that to me too. Pwede ka ulit makatama. Not necessarily na parang bola ulit. Pero meron ko pa rin pwedeng simulan yun na sinasabi ng doktor. You can dream again. That's why for you and me, whatever your failure in life, ano nagkamali, hindi ka nakatapos ng pag-aaral, gusto mo makatapos, something happened, no? Pwede kang hindi na mag-aral. Mayroong mga kumpanya, hindi na nga iniisip kung, lalo kung Google, Facebook, na pwedeng, kahit hindi na nakatapos, wala silang pakialam kung anong kurso mo eh. No, I'm not saying do not study. What I'm saying is, maaaring yung dream mo hindi na ma-accomplish. But don't be disheartened. You can still dream again. Dream another dream. So, kinuwento ni Junyong doon kay Yoon Seo. At sabi niya ng bata, I decided to have another dream. I will study hard and become a baseball reporter. Hindi na siya pwede maging player. Reporter. Kasi love niya ang baseball. And looking to his dad, sabi niya, sorry dad, I didn't tell you that because I thought you'd worry. That's why I didn't tell you. And then the father holding the hand of his son said, it's okay. It's okay. Di ba? You can have another dream. You have failed, yes. Big failure. Sabihin mo na that you can begin. Angat. Pwede kang makabawi sa buhay. Look at this statement. Consult not your fears, but your hopes and your dreams. Think not about your frustrations, but about your unfulfilled potential. Anong galing mo? What can you contribute to the world? What can you give to the world? Gusto ko lang po tapusin ito. Nakita ko lang po may nag-post sa Facebook nito. Ang title po, parang isang babae, can we normalize changing career paths kahit na malayo sa degree natin? No, yun po yung parang tanong eh. I mean, stop saying, sayang accountant sana siya, nagbebenta na lang siya ngayon. Sayang doktor sana siya, nagpo-photograph na lang siya ngayon. Di ba, parang ganun, parang sinasabi nitong babae, okay lang mag-change ng career path kung hindi yung ng kanyang dream na iba eh. Don't put down. If someone is striving to reach his or her dreams and pursuing her passion, congratulate him or her. That means she conquered her comfort zone. That she or he is courageous. You cannot equate passion to title. Ano yung passion? Ano yung burden? Ano yung heart niya? Ano yung gusto niya ma-contribute? Kaya sabi, PS, dinagdag niya, bonus pag yung tinapos mo, align sa passion mo. Pero minsan hindi. Maaring something happen along the way. Bakit yan ang kinuha mo? Dahil sinunod mo lang magulang mo. Dahil yan ang gusto ng magulang mo. Pero iba talagang gusto mo eh. Meron akong alam mga istoryang ganyan eh. Sumunod lang out of respect. Sumunod lang yung anak. Pero pagkatapos nila ng kurso na yun, pinursu nila yung gusto talaga nila. Kaya sabi po, look at this. Concern yourself not with what you have tried and failed in, but with what it is still possible for you to do. Posible pa rin. Pwede ka magawa. Meron din po magandang pinos. I'd like to show you this sa Facebook page po. Meron pong nag-post nito. I'd like to share. Look at this. No? Nakalagay po dyan, everyone should start at least one business in their lifetime. Entrepreneur eh. Not to learn to make money, but to experience personal growth through rejection, risk-taking, camaraderie, survival, and meaning at all costs. It's beautiful. Tapos yung nag-post po niya, nag-comment siya ng sarili niya. I also encountered rejection, criticism, and failures, even loss from customers. And eventually, ma-overcome lang nimo na tanan. No? Pasensya na, Cebuano eh. Ma-overcome lang lahat. Masanay ka na to the extent na matrain na nimo imong self na dili dali ma-hurt. Na hindi ka madali masaktan. Dili maging sensitive and to be okay even if you're not. Many times na feeling down ka, but you need to get up. Kaya na ka pa rent, napay salary, na pa inventories na kailangan asikasuhin, yun ang sinasabi niya. Pero itong gusto ko na part na sinulat niya, you will learn not to think of yourself alone and not to be selfish. Experience niya. She left a job, pursued an entrepreneurial job, start a small business, no? Pero sa kanya, ako rin ganun, may failure. Pero ang aking iniisip, hindi lang sarili ko. Hindi ako maging selfish. Iniisip niya yung mga taong under her. Kaya, napakaganda. Humble and strong people don't have the same trouble lang kagaya po ng mga egotist. Kaya, iba nagsisuicide. Psalm 73 verse 26, ang ganda-ganda pong pagkasabi, my flesh and my heart may fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever. And this is what we're aspiring to, more than success. What matters is that we can respond to what life throws at us. Kung ano man ang isuntok sa atin. Wayne Walter Dyer said, live today, remove all blame from your vocabulary. Catch yourself when you find yourself using your past history as a reason for your failure to act today, and instead say, I am free now to detach myself from what used to be. No? That's why, no? Sabi po, lastly, ni Woodrow Wilson, the difference between a strong man and a weak one is that the former, the strong one, does not give up after a defeat. Grabe. How about you? Ano pong inyong sitwasyon? Allow me to end. I just like to finish this with this. Ang ganda-ganda pong storya ni J.K. Rowling. Siya po yung author ng mga Harry Potter books. Pag makita po, akala natin successful siya, daming libro, naging movies yung kanyang mga librong sinulat. Panoorin po natin yung kanyang mga naging struggle sa buhay. Let's watch.
The most traumatizing moment in Rowling's life was the day her mother died. She was 25 at the time. The death of her mother shattered her completely. This happened 6 months after she began writing Harry Potter, and she was sorry that her mother never knew that she was writing it. After the death of her mother, she moved to Portugal in 1992 and got married. Soon she gave birth to a daughter, Jessica. But things became worse. Sadly, her marriage didn't last long, and only after 13 months she divorced him and moved to Edinburgh with her daughter and the first 3 chapters of Harry Potter. She was forced to rely on state benefits and spent much of her time writing Harry Potter in cafes, with Jessica sleeping in the prom next to her. An exceptionally short-lived marriage had imploded, and I was jobless, a lone parent, and as poor as possible to be in modern Britain without being homeless. By every usual standard, I was the biggest failure I knew. Rowling fell into a deep depression and admits she even considered suicide. So, how her life changed? Because she was so poor she couldn't afford a computer, or even the cost of photocopying the 90,000 word novel, so she manually typed each version to send to publishers. After sending her manuscript to 12 different publishers and getting rejected by every single one, Rowling began losing confidence in her book. Finally, the publishing house in London, Bloomsbury, a small London publisher, gave it a second chance after the CEO's 8-year-old daughter fell in love with it. Her books has since sold more than 450 million copies, won innumerable awards, been made into movies, and completely transformed Rowling's life. In 2011, Forbes estimated Rowling to be worth about $1 billion. She remains on its list of the world's most powerful celebrities and top-earning authors. J.K. Rowling went from being a jobless single mother to one of the best-selling authors of all time. But it didn't happen overnight. She faced rejections and constantly strived for success. She worked hard at her craft before anyone noticed her. If you have a dream or a passion and you just keep getting rejected or running into failure, don't let that stop you. If you're going through a tough time in your life, but working in something you really believe in, don't give up. Who knows, you might end up breaking records. So, what's your story?
Grabe, no? Difficulties upon difficulties, ang sabi ng narrator. Death of her mother, no? Divorce, forced to rely on state benefits. Kaya sabi niya, an exceptionally short-lived marriage had imploded and I was jobless, a lone parent, and as poor as possible to be in modern Britain without being homeless. By every usual standard, I was the biggest failure I knew. Kaya, depressed. Gusto mang mag-suicide. No? Rejected by 12 different publishers until somebody sumubok. Yung maliit na kumpanya, and history na po. 450 million copies. $1 billion ang halaga niyo noong 2011. She remains on the list as the world's most powerful celebrity's top-earning author, being a jobless single mother to one of the best-selling authors of all time. No? But it didn't happen overnight. She faced rejections and constantly strived for success. Grabe. That's why, ang comment po nung sumulat nung video na yun, if you have a dream or a passion and you just keep getting rejected and running into failure, don't let that stop you. If you're going through a tough time in your life but working on something you really believe in, don't give up. Who knows? You might end up breaking records. Baka kayo po yun. Baka another J.K. Rowling in the making. Failure is part of success. Let's pray. Panginoon, napakabuti mo po sa amin. Sa gitna ng mga kabaksakan namin, kasiraan namin, mga sariling, minsan kami mismo ang cause, O Lord God. O kung hindi man kami, ibang tao, o kung, O Lord God, trahedya lang nangyari by nature, Lord, allow us to respond. Allow us to look up to you. Allow us to see your hand guiding us and lifting us up. Allowing you, Lord God, to take hold of us. It's your pleasure to help us, Lord. Isang kagalakan sa iyo na tulungan kami sa aming buhay. Kaya nagpapasalamat kami na hindi mo kami iniiwan. O Lord, kung hinahayaan mo kaming sumabit, hinahayaan mo kaming, O Lord God, magkamali sa aming mga buhay. Salamat, Panginoon. Lord, we can congratulate ourselves because something good can happen. We can congratulate ourselves, Lord, dahil mayroong nangyari sa aming puso, may nangyari sa aming pag-iisip, may nangyari sa aming buhay. May kaayusan na nangyari. Masakit lang, Panginoon. Pero subalit, Panginoon, nagpapasalamat kami, Lord God, na itataguyod mo kami sa aming mga lakbayan. Lord, maraming salamat na sa pag-aaral na ito, Lord God, Lord, manatili lang kaming, Lord God, nakatingin sa iyo. Manatili kami, Panginoon, Lord God, nagpapasakop sa iyo, Lord God, para makita namin ang tamang kaparaanan ng buhay. Salamat, Panginoon, Lord God, na ang sa mga darating na araw sa aming buhay, masama man o mabuti, ikaw lang, O Diyos, ang nakakaalam. At muli, O Lord God, naghahandog kami ng aming ikapo, ng aming mga love offerings. Dahil, Panginoon, karapat dapat kang sambahin sa pamagitan ng mga kaloob na ito. At salamat, Panginoon, mag-workout ka sa aming mga buhay. Panghahawakan ka namin, O Lord God, sa linggong ito. Meron kaming baong-baong kalakasan sa loob po namin. Maraming salamat, Panginoon, at ibabalik lang sa iyo ang lahat ng papuri at pagsamba sa pangalan ni Jesus. Amen. Amen. Maraming salamat po sa pagsama nyo. No, nag-extend lang po ako dito. Pero muli pong gusto ko yung paalalahanan announcement. Next Sunday, face-to-face po tayo. Kayong mga taga GenSan, physical gathering po tayo. February 7, 2021 from 8 to 10. Isang service lang po muna tayo. No? Pero at the same time, naka-live streaming naman po tayo. And after that, pwede nyo naman mabalikan po yung link na yon at mapanood anytime. Kung kayo po ay sumusubaybay sa amin, sa afternoon po kayo, you can go to the Facebook page and get the link. Or subscribe and like us para po nagkakaroon po kayo, nano-notify po kayo. Automatic na makikita po ninyo yung ating mga links na yan. Muli po, please register when we post yung ating pong registration link sa Bread of Life close group po, doon po namin ilalagay yung link kasi yung mga taga Bread of Life po, doon po namin ipapasa yung link ng registration, ng online registration. Maraming salamat po muli. Share and like our Facebook page, our subscribe to our YouTube channel, and share po itong link na to sa mga taong pwede po matulungan. Maraming salamat po. Mahal po kayo ng Panginoon. Nawa magpatuloy kayo sa kanyang lakbayin.